All right, welcome everyone, and thank you again for joining us this evening. This is one of the last sessions this semester in our MBA and Grad Chat series for the RIT Saunders College of Business. My name is Matt Cornwell, and I work with our Student Services Office. So I'm the Associate Director for Student Services, and I work closely with our graduate programs and our prospective graduate students. So tonight, we will dive into some details about our programs, things like application process, and some of those logistical items. I do want to try and keep this fairly conversational if we can. So please do not hesitate to ask any questions that you have. I definitely want to get those addressed, so feel free to do that. Also, if you don't mind putting in the chat what program or programs you may be interested in, that would be helpful, just to kind of cater the session to what may be of interest for you all. And if you don't know, that's fine too. But the guidance there is definitely helpful. Okay, so I do have a short slide deck that I am going to bounce around a little bit with, and just try and keep that piece about 15-20 minutes. Okay, Issa, you're interested in the PhD. Okay, so I am not going to cover a ton on the PhD tonight. We did have an information session for that last month. So you can certainly feel free to go back and view that recording, as we did record that session. So feel free to do that. I think it can be helpful from the lens of, the session itself, just giving you kind of a feel for what RIT and Saunders College of Business is all about from a community standpoint. But the PhD is very, specific in what it looks for. So so just some quick highlights there. Accounting and analytics, I know we have a couple interested in that, which we'll definitely touch on. Very much a growing program for us, and in part because of the CPA shortage. And then Alec, I know we've met previously, plus one MBA, the time program, I would assume. And then the EMBA, that program, again, that's another one I'm not going to spend a ton of time on because it does have very specific requirements, including at least 6 years of professional work experience. And many folks actually have quite a bit more than that. The MBA does have a recruiter that is specifically recruits for that program as well. But okay, this is very helpful, though, for me, just to kind of guide things. All right, let me share this PowerPoint here quickly. I lost my share screen. Wow, that's popped up here. There we go. Okay. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so we'll do some, again, we did introductions here, so we'll just kind of run down the portfolio of our programs. The Saunders mission and vision statement, I think the key takeaways from this, I won't spend a ton of time on it, but we are very career oriented within the Saunders College and RIT on the whole. So our goals within your educational experience, whether it's at the undergrad or graduate level, is to give you tangible hands-on experiences that you can take away with you, right? Whether that's a co-op or an internship, that's kind of the most notable one. But within the classrooms, we are very experiential driven. So you're going to do case studies. You're going to work with actual companies on projects. You're going to work with real data sets. So those things are woven into our curriculum, and we value that greatly, because we want to put that theory into practice, and we really value that. And really, we want to set you up for enduring contributions and, create those enterprising students. We have some outstanding students that have a really great entrepreneurial focus. So those are things that we really value within the College of Business. And being that RIT is a technical institution, an institute of technology, we really value that business and technology connection. And I think we see that across a lot of our programs. RIT and the Saunders College of Business is AACSB accredited. That is important as you consider particularly graduate business schools. The AACSB accreditation is the highest accreditation a business school can possess, and only about 5% of business schools actually hold this accreditation, and that's internationally as well. So it's a high bar, and a lot of companies will look for students that come from AACSB accredited institutions. So keep that in mind. We are a small college within RIT's larger scope and university. So we have about 1,000, 1,050 students between our undergrad and graduate programs. And it kind of gives you the best of both worlds with the large university, but the small school, feel and connection and community. And I think that small school feels very valuable in giving you those opportunities that you may not get elsewhere within the large scope of the resources that RIT can offer you. So I think that's an important piece to be mindful of as well. We do have a very strong alumni network as well. We actually just did a session this morning with 3 of our outstanding graduate alumni who actually sit on our national council as well, that are in very, very high ranking positions, executive positions with a variety of companies. We did record that, so if you do want to look back at that and review that, let us know. But just an example of the connections we try and foster with the alumni and allowing you to build those networks, as that's another just very important piece to the career outcomes that we're pretty proud of at RIT. I won't spend a ton of time on this slide. These are just some of the rankings that set the scope for what we kind of offer here at RIT. Actually, one of the notable ones is RIT on the whole as a national university cracked the top 100 last year and actually ranks number 91. So this 98 it actually is now 91. So we're really proud of that. It's not an easy feat to get there. But we're really proud of that, and that jump even over the last year of 7 spots is something that's pretty notable. So that's an important piece when you're thinking about the scope and the values of the schools that you're looking at. And then you can see here some of the various rankings within our graduate business programs. Top 75 business school from a graduate perspective with Bloomberg Business Week, top 100 with Poets and Quants. So a lot of value there and things that you want to be mindful of as you're looking through schools. This is obviously one factor, one variable, but I think it's important to see that and take it into consideration as you're considering options. Okay, so program offerings. We kind of break this down into 2 buckets. You have the MBA, which is a generalist degree by nature. So you're getting that generalist exposure to business. And then within our program, you can elect to dive a little bit deeper into not a concentration, but more of like a focus area if you elect to. All of our on-campus programs are now STEM designated. So for any international students who are looking to potentially stay in the US longer, your OPT is extended. So you would receive a 2-year extension on your OPT. The typical OPT is 1 year, but with that extension, it would go to 3 years total, an additional 2 years on top of the traditional 1 year that you would get. So 3 years total with the OPT. And I think the other thing too with the STEM designation that I think is important, our hospitality and tourism management program actually, I'm sorry, it's hospitality business management now. That program is now STEM designated as well. There's only one other hospitality STEM program in the country, and that's at Boston University. So we're pretty proud of that as well. But the STEM piece, again, we're at an institute of technology, so that those STEM aspects are very much woven into the curriculums. For the MBA, we do have the accelerated option. I know, Alec, you had mentioned that. Obviously, there's course waivers associated with that. That's specifically for domestic students who have taken business coursework at either at RIT or other business schools. And, some of those foundational courses can be waived based on grades you achieved in those classes. An MBA is traditionally a 16 course, 48 credit program, but with the waivers, you can get it all the way down to just 10 courses and 30 credits. And then full or part-time options are certainly available. The discipline-specific MS programs, again, a Master of Science program is in that specific discipline area of study. So I know we have a few folks interested in accounting and analytics. That is a very fast-growing program for us. It's probably now our biggest Master of Science program, just behind or just ahead of business analytics. So that's something we're pretty happy with and proud of. But that connection of accounting, analytics, MIS, and the technology aspects that you see in accounting nowadays is very much a robust part of that program. But yeah, you can see here some of the other offerings that we have. Good options across the board if you are looking for a discipline-specific MS. And those programs are typically 12 months, so a full calendar year, but 12 months, 30 credits for a lot of those offerings. And then scholarship, obviously scholarship opportunities are very critical and important. Obviously, you're making an investment here, and we do support students with merit scholarships. Our general scholarship range is about 20% to 50% of tuition. Any RIT students who stay for a graduate degree at this point, there are still master plan scholarships available, and I believe that's going to be available through fall of 2025, and then they're going to reassess that. But there are 40% tuition scholarships with the master plan. Any RIT honors students will get 50%, and then any students that are residents of New York State or graduated from a New York State college or university would get an automatic 30% scholarship. And I think the other piece here as well is these are merit-based. So there's opportunities to potentially get a scholarship that levels up to a 40 or 50%. So if you are very strong academically, you've performed well, on any testing requirements that we may have or stuff like that, you can definitely potentially secure a pretty strong scholarship award with strong scores and a strong academic background. But generally speaking, that minimum award consideration starts at about 20 to 30%. And then from there, we determine, what that additional scholarship could be going forward. Okay, so the MBA, the format of the MBA, there's 10 core business classes that you will do. Again, that span a variety of different business disciplines. There's also the capstone course that's called Competitive Strategy. And then because the program is STEM designated, there's 3 STEM electives that you'll do and 2 graduate electives. The STEM electives, there's a pretty exhaustive list at the website. If you just type in RIT MBA curriculum, that'll take you right to our curriculum page and kind of outline what the curriculum aspects are that we have. The graduate electives can be technically any graduate course at RIT. So if you have interests in other areas outside of business that may not be STEM necessarily, you can certainly pursue those as courses as long as you meet the prerequisites. We'll try and work with you to get you into those classes. But again, 16 total classes, 48 credits. If you do need the full MBA program, it can be done in about a year and a half if you do summer classes. So a 4-semester sequence with 4 classes per term is fairly standard if you do need the full program. And then if you are accelerating it, it can be, again, cut down to 3 semesters, even 2 in some cases, depending on how many waivers you are able to get. Okay, I'm going to pass over supply chain. I don't believe we had anybody that mentioned this specifically. I'll leave the slide up for just a minute. You can kind of read through it, but it's really just a matter of connecting folks, to opportunities from a supply chain perspective. very strong analytical skill set is necessary for this program to kind of analyze that supply chain from, you know, getting product or even just materials to build and you know, carry out the innovation of a product from, you know, your company's doorstep, their, you know, facility, their factory, and then ultimately that process of carrying all of that out and getting a product to a customer's doorstep. So again, that program is 12 months, 30 credits, and can be done in that kind of time frame. Yes, Shital. Yep. So all students, it doesn't matter if you're international or not, are considered for merit-based scholarships. Absolutely. Yep. So there's no limitations there in terms of, you know, domestic versus international. We just have some incentives here and there for RIT undergrad students that did complete an RIT undergrad degree. Okay, MS in finance. Again, I don't believe we had anyone specifically reference this, but this program, again, also STEM designated, really designed for students who have interest in a managerial career in finance, corporate investment, portfolio management. It also can be catered to students who might have interest in something like computational finance. We did used to have an MS in that program, but now that our MS finance is STEM designated, there is the ability to wrap in things like mathematical finance. If you have interest in building algorithms or financial models, and you have some background in computer programming, some math background like linear algebra, stuff like that, you can build kind of a pathway that can accommodate opportunities in the fintech space and in investment and building you know, building out models and stuff like that. So that is an option. The program, MS Finance, is actually quite flexible. There's a lot of electives in the program. There's 6 total, I believe, 4 core classes, and even 2 of the core classes could potentially be waived off if you already have a business background with accounting and finance. So there's good opportunities there to customize the program to what you may want to accomplish. And then MS Accounting and Analytics. So I know we had a handful of students actually interested in this one. Again, this program was actually redeveloped and kind of focused over the last couple of years, given the interest that we had from employers that came to us and said, we want your students that have that tech, analytics, and MIS background. And we felt that we wanted to build that into and leverage that into an actual degree program to give students those skill sets that span, you know, both disciplines and areas. So we really do focus and give students that business analytics kind of skill and foundation, but also allowing you to lever up and gain some more advanced content in accounting. And it also gets you on that pathway for the CPA exam. So if you have an undergraduate degree in accounting, you really do need that to pursue this program. If you have, you know, what would be equivalent to an accounting minor in the US, we could explore this as an option, but you really do need that accounting background, especially for the CPA. You need to meet those certain thresholds. So, but yeah, this program is set up in a way to get you those opportunities and set you on a career path that will help you stand out and will help you pursue opportunities at big 4 accounting firms and firms like KPMG and Deloitte and PwC and companies like that. So, you know, certainly good options there. And we really value the connections we're able to build with these employers that are seeking out our students within the accounting space. And then MS Business Analytics. This is our second largest Master of Science program. This is a little bit more general in terms of how business analytics is viewed across a multitude of business disciplines. So it really gives you the analytical focus and emphasis across areas like marketing, accounting, finance. You'll take an advanced business analytics course that incorporates R and Python quite a bit. And to that end, within the accounting and analytics and business analytics programs specifically, we do ask students to have or be prepared to take some preparatory coursework in R and Python. If you start kind of in a traditional fall or even spring term, we will provide, over the last year, we've developed kind of a boot camp that students will take, kind of the week before classes start. So that'll kind of get you that R and Python knowledge. There's also some Coursera classes that we can provide as well if you have interest in that. But we do look for that, not necessarily preemptively while applying, but we want to be clear that it is something that, is needed before you really start the program, because some of the coursework does, require some of that R and Python background. So that's another, thing to keep in mind as well. But it's this program, again, companies have vast amounts of data, and a lot of them are not good at analyzing it and, using it to inform decision making, right? And that's one of the key elements of this program is you're going to have the skill set and ability to lead data strategy, formulation, collection, but how then are you going to lever it up and use it to enhance decision making? And that's where the business aspect comes into play. And okay, we have this data, we've analyzed it, but how are we going to use it to enhance everything that we're doing in our organization? Whether that's through, enhancing the bottom line, through enhancing a business process, enhancing and adding maybe an information technology system to, your company. All of those things, kind of come to head in this program. So it can be a good fit for students that, want to, have those skill sets, and it's very desirable for companies and organizations. And then again, I did mention the hospitality business management program that is now STEM designated. We are moving this more to an on-campus offering, as well. This program really designed for students that are looking to further their careers in hospitality, and also want to kind of, build in a kind of a secondary focus that can almost give you additional opportunities in areas within hospitality, like finance, digital marketing, entrepreneurship, things like that. So it can allow you to kind of diversify yourself, within the scope of a hospitality kind of business management style program. And then organizational leadership and innovation. Again, I don't think anyone referenced this program specifically. It's really designed for folks that are working full time and want to build in some leadership and innovation programming and just further content, right? So it is currently exclusively online, catered to students that are working full time and want to chip away at a program. And again, designed to allow students to enhance those leadership and innovative skills. Oftentimes, we do like to see students have some work experience for this program, not necessarily a requirement, but we do like to see that, so that can be helpful as well. But, students within this space, kind of, you can see some of the prospective job titles. HR roles are definitely, this program kind of was built initially, from an HR perspective, and it kind of wove in, some HR coursework as well. So that's another space here where, you can see some coursework under the human resource umbrella within this program. Okay, so co-op and career opportunities, certainly there's an abundance of them. A co-op is an internship kind of taken to the next level at RIT. Our co-ops are paid experiences, full-time work experiences where you're getting that at least across a semester. Co-ops are not required at the graduate level, but they certainly can be done, and particularly for international students, a lot of them do seek out co-op opportunities. I would say like 35% of our graduate students do end up electing to do a co-op. Typically that will come, over a summer, maybe while you're wrapping up a program, or, you take a summer co-op, and then it might extend the program by a semester. But the nice thing with the co-op is, it's a paid experience. And generally speaking, a lot of students will not take classes in addition to the co-op, so they will not be paying tuition. So it does give you an opportunity to build up some capital as well, and some monetary gains there with the co-op piece. Yeah, so there's definitely students that are seeking out co-op opportunities within the accounting and analytics program. I'm not sure what you mean by foreign co-ops. Generally speaking, if you're doing a co-op, you're going to be doing it in the U.S., especially as an international student, because you have the CPT built into your studies and program. But it is sought after by the accounting and analytics students. So we have a couple specific things that support that process for accounting students in particular, because their recruitment cycle is pretty specific in accounting. We have a boutique accounting career fair that is available to accounting students. We also tend to bring in a fair number of finance and accounting employers throughout any semester, any given academic year. So we'll host those folks and students will have the chance to visit with them. In addition to that, we also have two very large career fairs each year bring about 250 employers to campus. And typically about half of those employers are seeking business students for various opportunities. But we've had students co-op. We have some local accounting firms that the Bonadio Group is one, but we have local Big Four offices too, PwC, and then some students over summer may go to a big city and co-op as well. So that's something as well. If you have those opportunities, you can certainly seek out. But there are those opportunities within the accounting and analytics program. Yeah. So again, there are co-ops at the graduate level. I mean, it's few and far between where we see students do a co-op internationally. That's not to say it's not possible. I will say one space that we are looking to grow is study abroad opportunities at the graduate level. We have a couple courses we're actually working on where students will be able to kind of study abroad as part of the course. I don't see, though, a lot of graduate students doing co-ops internationally. Again, if you have a specific, space that you're looking at and you're like, yes, I would love to co-op here, especially if it's in a location near maybe one of our RIT campuses that is abroad in Croatia or even someplace like Dubai, then maybe there's an opportunity there. But it's not something that we see a ton of. But certainly something that could be explored if that's of interest. Okay, and then these are just some of the partners that we have across the board, not really by discipline, but just kind of across the different spaces and areas in business that students have worked with in the past. Each of our departments does have an advisory board as well. So again, a lot of that is alumni or strong contributors to the university, and they can be very, very valuable from a networking perspective. I mentioned the session we did this morning with the National Council. That's basically our Dean's Advisory Board. Those members sit on that board. So good opportunities there to network as well. And then again, I've mentioned entrepreneurship a couple times. We have a variety of support in that space. So if you do have interest in entrepreneurship, we have this accelerator program, Tiger Tank competitions. You can even pursue through the accelerator program, you can even pursue that experience and whatever you may be trying to build out, whether it's a product or a service, and carry that forward for co-op credit. And the accelerated does typically include stipends. It includes coaching as well. So it's a really robust offering. The Simone Center at some point within the last couple of years was rated as the #1 incubator in the country. So entrepreneurship is really woven into RIT's culture. It's really a bread and butter kind of piece to what we do. And it's very interdisciplinary, and that's intentional. We want students working with engineers and computing folks. And again, all of that comes back to being able to carry it out on the business side. So good opportunities there to connect, network, work in groups, and see what that will look like once you get into the workforce and carry those things forward. And then the last thing we'll end with are the Saunders College of Business did undergo a significant expansion last year. We opened officially January of 24, so we've been open almost a year. You can see some of the photos of the space. It's been incredible. Honestly, it's been awesome to have the new space. A lot of great space in there for team rooms and a brand new auditorium. That one's, in the middle here. So a lot of good opportunities there, but it's added quite a bit of value to the students and lots of good opportunities to connect and network in the new space. And then application requirements. The easiest spot to go is just ret.edu/apply. I will say for any students on here that are RIT students that might be doing the +1 MBA or something like that, we can connect offline because your process may look a little differently depending on where you stand with some things. So just be mindful of that. But you do have to obviously have a baccalaureate degree. You can be in progress with that and still apply. We just have to see that degree certified and awarded to you before you actually start the program. We do prefer students to have a working knowledge of algebra and statistics as well, because the vast majority of programs do at least have a little bit of, knowledge that you'll need to infuse from an algebra and stats perspective. Your official transcripts of previous undergrad and graduate coursework. So if you do have any graduate coursework you've completed, please include that. And then the GMAT or GRE is required for international students unless you've already earned an undergraduate degree or above in the US. So be mindful of that. The IELTS or TOEFL is also required for international students, again, unless you've already completed a degree in the US. And then there is a personal statement that you will submit. One thing with that is please don't use things like ChatGPT or AI to develop that. We want to hear from you. We want you to convey your story to us, right? This is your chance to market yourself. It's 400 words. In business, you do have to be concise a lot of times in your writing. So we want to hear from you, and we want to know who you are and what your goals are and why you want to pursue the program. So, be mindful of that as you're working through the personal statement. And then a current resume as well. We don't require work experience, but again, if you have some, great. But we want to see things, what degrees you're pursuing, anything you've done outside of school, any internships or co-ops that you've done, those types of things within the resume are very helpful as well. And then next steps, again, a good next step is definitely meeting with us one-on-one. I generally lead those meetings. So all of you are coming at this from an individual perspective, right? You have different goals, different aspirations. So this is kind of a high level overview of what we have. But a good next step is to meet one-on-one if that's of interest. But yeah. And again, feel free to start your application today. Just kind of a logistical / start term overview of the programs. The MBA can be started any semester, so fall, spring, or summer. So we are still accepting applications for spring. It is getting a little bit late though. So if you are thinking you want to start the MBA in the spring, you should apply ASAP. We also have cohorts starting for business analytics and accounting and analytics this spring. So if you do have interest in the spring, again, you want to apply ASAP. And especially if you're an international student, it can get a little hairy this late. We're 2 months away basically from classes starting. We start classes January 13th, actually exactly 2 months away. Today's November 13th. So about 2 months away from actually starting classes in the spring. So if you do have that interest, great. And you can certainly apply, but just be mindful of that application should come very soon if that's what you're thinking. Otherwise, the Master of Science programs are typically fall only starts. So it would be a fall 2025 endeavor that you'd be looking at. But yeah, so that kind of wraps the formal piece of the presentation. So I would welcome questions now. If you have questions, feel free to ask those at this point. And I'm happy to address any of those. Yeah, Alex, so you could take a graduate course while you're still an undergrad. Students, we do have students that will do that at RIT. So so we can talk through that, but that is an option, yes. So if you have a graduate degree from Canada, you should be okay for the GMAT GRE and the TOEFL waiver. I would just ask that you send me that info. We'll review it. Just kind of get that officially documented. And kind of go through those steps to ensure we can get you a waiver. The TOEFL piece should be fine. I believe, I'm certain, Canada falls under, we have certain countries that we will waive the TOEFL and IELTS for, and Canada certainly one. So, but yeah, you can certainly send me that information. I'm going to put my email in the chat here. And we can confirm all that stuff for you. So we do not, so TA opportunities for graduate students. We do not use teaching assistants. We just believe in the faculty teaching the classes. We do have graduate student worker or graduate assistantships though. That's often in support of faculty research. So sometimes that could be with a faculty in accounting and analytics or faculty, studying something in an accounting space. So there are those graduate student worker and assistantship opportunities. But yeah, other questions that folks have. And you can also unmute yourself too if you like, if you prefer. That's certainly welcome.
Is there a current like concurrent credit requirement? Like at the current moment, I take my classes pretty slowly because I work full time at a firm. So do I need to enroll in a minimum of like 6, 10 or 12 credits to continue like seeking the accounting degree?
No, not necessarily. I mean, depending on what your financial status is, you have to be at 6 credits for any like loans or anything, but otherwise you could take one class at a time.
Right. Yeah, I just report my work as a co-op to maintain the student status.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So
So,
that limits to 6 though, right?
I mean, if you were doing a co-op, well, you wouldn't. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that in the MS degree and do the co-op concurrently, but there's no minimum you have to be at
Okay.
necessarily. You have to finish in 7 years. That's where.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah. So, but we have students that will do one course at a time. They might ramp it up towards the end and do a couple, like 2
mhm.
courses, but it is possible that's fine. And you'll still get any scholarships or things like that will still be applicable with just one class. I will, most part-time students do 2, but you can try 1 and then go up it to 2. That's your call. But that is possible, just doing 1 at a time if that's easier.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep. Okay, so the R and Python prerequisite. Yeah. So you don't need that R and Python prerequisite to apply at all. And no, typically we're asking anyone for that stuff, even if you have background in R and Python, we're going to ask you to do it because we want everyone to be on the same wavelength. And for some folks, it might be super easy to get through that stuff. For others, it might take a little bit more work, but you do not need that in advance to apply. It's just something that once you're admitted, you'll be asked to go through that boot camp or potentially do the MOOCs in R and Python for, they're typically through like Coursera, and complete those. But yeah, other questions that that folks have. Oh, Malcolm, I see your question about the CPA prep too. Sorry, I just saw that. So the program itself is designed in a way to kind of prepare you for the CPA. like the curricular aspects and things like that are kind of built in to provide that support. But I know for a fact many students, will have study groups and things like that that kind of just organically come together. And then many of our accounting faculty have our CPAs themselves, so they can provide a lot of guidance and support there throughout those processes and as you kind of seek out the CPA component. So there is definitely support built in there. And a lot of the courses are, again, built in a way that provide that support. So we generally are not waiving the application fee. If it's a big, um, if it's a big barrier, we can talk about it. But I guess the approach that we've taken is RIT is an investment, like that we don't sugarcoat that. So, I think you have to be prepared to engage in that investment. And the application fee it's $65 US, which is much lower than a lot of other business schools. I know some that are like 200. So, but again, if it's a big barrier, and you feel pretty confident that otherwise you can make attending a reality, we can talk through that. But for students that may need things like the TOEFL, IELTS, and GMAT or GRE, I'm going to want to see those scores before we waive the application fee and those types of things. So it's a conversation we can have, but generally we're not waiving it. Okay, thank you, Bhaskar. Yeah, definitely have him reach out to me. So from a financial aid perspective, again, at the graduate level, the merit scholarships are going to be the support that you're provided. Those are the opportunities that are available. So again, somewhere between 20 and 50%. The average tends to be somewhere around 30 to 40. We've been pretty liberal with scholarships over the past few years, especially as COVID came and went. But the affordability piece is certainly a big aspect. But the merit scholarships are, the piece that we're going to provide, and then above and beyond that, you know, the rest of that investment is going to fall on you. We do have some endowed scholarships that we will award graduate students in some cases, but those are pretty competitive. And that's something that we kind of work through as our, applicant pool kind of comes into play. So there are a few of those that could be available, but outside of that, it's really the merit scholarships. Certainly any loans, if you're a domestic student or anything like that, like federal loans, certainly, available. They're calculated a little differently at the graduate level, obviously. You're viewed more as an independent at that point. So those calculations are a bit different, but the merit scholarships are going to be the primary, support from a financial perspective at the graduate level. All right. Other questions that folks have? All great stuff, and really appreciate the thoughtful questions. I'm also going to throw, I'm going to throw a link here in the chat as well. That'll take you to our graduate business program page that outlines all the graduate programs that we have. And that way you can dig into curriculums, take a look at, course descriptions and those types of things to give you some further detail on, courses and what's available there. Yes, so I did record the session. So that is something I will send out to all the registrants as well. So that'll take a day or two, but we will send out that as well. So folks can certainly review it at that point. But yeah, if there's no other questions, we can wrap up at this point. I appreciate everybody's time and thank you again for attending this evening. I will stick around briefly afterwards too if you have any individual questions that you want to address. But yeah, so we'll wrap up at this point. But thank you again all. And again, feel free to reach out and happy to discuss things as you progress forward and feel free to reach out. Thanks again. Have a good evening or early morning, wherever you might be calling in from.